1998. We're in Houston, Texas. I am visiting with Clifford Shultz, a member of the C Company, 17th Armored Infantry Battalion. And my name is Charlie Henson, and I really appreciate you coming today. First of all, I'm going to start out with your mom and dad and where you came from, your roots, before we move into how you got into World War II.
Oh, well, okay. My mother was born in Bunker Hill, Illinois, and her family moved out to Kingman County, Kansas, and my father's family roots were in about 7 miles from Bunker Hill, Illinois, in Shipman, Illinois, and they moved to Kingman County, Kansas, and my grandfather had a 160-acre farm, and the local school board took a one acre plot off that to build a schoolhouse. And after the schoolhouse was built, my mother was hired to teach, and my father's younger brothers and sisters were her students. So, so he decided he'd spark the school marm, and so that's where I came from.
Okay, what was your mother's maiden name?
Her maiden name was Hume, Lenora Hume.
Okay, and what's your dad's full name?
Clifford, Arthur Glenn Shultz.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
5 brothers and 3 sisters, and all but 3 of them are still alive.
Okay, where are you in the pecking order?
Well, I'm number 4, right in the middle.
Okay, tell me about the experiences that got you into World War II. Where you, high school, kind of what got you there, led you on that road?
Well, I was born in Wichita, Kansas, and went to school there until the first year in high school.
What year was that?
I don't remember.
Well, tell me what year you were born.
I was born in 1924.
Yes,
yesterday was my birthday. I was 74 years old yesterday.
September 9th?
September 9th, 1924. And I went to high school, and my dad said he had a contracting job, a remodeling job that I could earn big money, you know. This is during the Depression, by the way, and so I quit school and went to work for him. He had a big blow up with the owner of the house, and he walked away from it. So there I was. No, so he and I didn't get along too well anyhow. So before long, I lit a shuck and took off and went out to an uncle, his younger brother, out in western part of Kansas, and spent I don't know, a month or so there. And another uncle wrote me a letter inviting me to come and work for him. And I don't think I ought to tell you how what kind of wages he offered me. Well, I might as well. He offered me $15 a month, board and room, for working on the farm, and that's pretty heavy work. And but I was about 14, 15 years old, and I learned to do what had to be done, and I developed the muscles to do it. And he had to milk 24 cows morning and evening, and that was. And when time for the school year to start, well, I asked if I could work in the morning and evening and go to school, and he agreed to do that. So I paid somebody $2 a week to ride with them up to school, and or $2 a month, I should say. So it wasn't, and it left me $5.50 every month. You know, that was not too bad. You know, and you know, a pair of glasses, which now costs $250, $300, would cost maybe $15, $16. So you can get some kind of perspective on what the economy was, what the value of the dollar was, and I'm prolonging this, I'm sure. So I went to work there, and then we had a little tough tiff after about 2 years, and he just told me to pack up and go. So I packed up and went.
And you were 16?
Yeah, about that. And then I got a job in the local restaurant, washing dishes, and went to the same school. And at the end of that year, despite my really sort of mediocre efforts at studying, I was second in the class. and my brother, who lived in McPherson, Kansas, invited me to come up there and work for him. He had a service station. And so I went to work for him, and about, I think I must be hard to get along with, because my brother's wife and I struck sparks. And so I left there, and I finished. I got a job washing dishes at a restaurant there in McPherson, and then finished high school on May the 19th of 1943, and was drafted the 9th of June. So there wasn't a real long, prolonged poverty. I was poverty all the way, but
what kind of pay did you get when you entered the Army?
What kind of what?
What pay did you get when you entered the Army? Do you remember?
Oh, it was $21 a month. $21 a day, once a month.
Was that pretty good considering the economy?
Well, it was. That was what the Army was paying. I made probably $250 during the summer for an entire summer's work prior to that. But that was what the Army was paying at that time. So.
Where did you go to? Where did they induct you into the Army?
At Fort Leavenworth, Kansas.
Tell me about the first day.
The
things you remember, the smells, the things that surprised you.
It wasn't. On June the 9th, we got on the bus and went up to, I don't know where, Kansas City, I guess, and we got a pre-induction physical, and then they brought us back, and then shortly thereafter we got on a train and wound up at Fort Leavenworth. And as far as the first day at Fort Leavenworth, well, that was a Chinese fire drill type chaos, and I know we got there late at night. It must have been around midnight, and we were taken to the barracks and given a bunk, and here's where you live, and so we finally staggered to bed, and the next morning they woke us up at 4 o'clock to show us how to make a bed, and I wasn't an awfully good pupil in that, but got that done, and then they took us out, and I don't remember. It was just a total blur. What they went through, picking up clothing and learning how to fold it up and put it in your foot locker and all that stuff. Just menial stuff. And then it was some night got to bed real late, up at like 4 o'clock again, and had to go take examinations. Wow. So I took these Army, what do they call it? The GCT, General Classification Test. And I didn't do very well. I got 99 or something like that. And I said, well, that's silly. I know I can do better than that, but give me a night's rest, for crying out loud. So I went back. They held me there at Fort Leavenworth while so that I could get a retest. I finally got it, and I got about 129 or something like that. Which was a substantial increase, and no studying even. but I was pretty rested then, so that made a difference. I was trying to get into ASDP, And then, of course, shortly after that, they were taking anybody, ASTP and all. ASTP was just phased out. And so I joined the 12th Armored. Well, they sent me to Fort Knox, Kentucky for basic training. And I took my training in tanks. I drove a medium tank, 76 millimeter cannon on the top of it. And
was that your choice? At that point, did they let you choose what you wanted to do? Or was it one of those, go get in the tank?
It is to laugh. Yeah, they gave you the choice. You do it or you do it, or they'll put you in the brig. I mean, if you like life in the brig, it's a choice.
Did you the tank, when you were sitting in the tank? What was that feel? What was it like? Give me space.
Well, you got there are two levers that you operate, and you got an accelerator, and you pull the left lever, and it turns the tank to the left. The right lever turns it to the right, and you got a piece of your chin's resting on a piece of steel on the turret, and it's usually the hatch is open, and so you drive along with your helmet on, and then once in a while they tell you to button up, and it means you've closed the hatch and you look through a little periscope. Well, that periscope is a prism arrangement so that you can see without being shot, and but you can't see very much. So during the course of my training, I managed to. They just said I couldn't see anything. I was up on a hill. Well, the periscope doesn't keep level, and you can't move your periscope the way you can your head. So I was on this supposed to go over this bridge, and I went up on the parapet instead, and the weight of the tank then sheared the little things that hold the track on, and so there I sat. You know, all I could see was blue sky. So we had called the maintenance people, and we spent the rest of the day sitting around waiting for them to put new lugs on that thing. So that was part of my. And I had some nice experiences. One day we had a real nice run down a slope, and somebody said, "Hey, left. You want to turn to the left?" So I turned to the left, ran into a concrete post, and stopped dead.
Was that normal for everybody in a tank? Or
well, I'm sure that I'm sure I had to be abnormal about that. But that sort of mishap did happen to a lot of people. But as then I don't think that all of that stuff showed up on any records or anything like that. But as it happened that after basic training, well, they sent me to the armored infantry. So I went from a tank driver to a gravel agitator.
In your tank, was it how many men were in that tank?
5.
5. Okay, tell me how they were positioned in that tank.
Well, there was one. Wait, 5? Yeah, there was one, the driver, and then the what they call the bow gunner, and then there was a guy who sat behind the sight to sight the gun, and one to load the gun. Huh? No, I guess 4. And then that was the guy that aimed the gun was on the right of the breech, and the loader had to jam those shells up into the breech and dodge them when they came back out. I think wham, and it slams back and kicks the shell back, the casing back out.
How many rounds did y'all have in a tank at one time?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I didn't count that stuff. I remember one day we were loading ammunition, and they had the ammunition were in cardboard cartons, and there were 3 in a stack, and then they had a little cloverleaf deal that fit on the end, so you could carry 3 at a time. And they were taking those off so that we could put them into the tanks. And this guy stacking these up like cordwood was pretty darn heavy. And he started walking, and the shell slid off. And he dropped the rest of them and started to run. The lieutenant says, "Hey, soldier, how far do you think you were going to get?" He had a fifth of a second timing device on him, so I mean, you got to be a pretty fast runner to outrun it. But that was one oddball instance.
Do you remember your lieutenant at Fort Knox?
No.
Okay. Who was the?
I remember our drill sergeant.
Okay, tell me that.
His name was Sergeant Golden R. Day. Can you imagine a name like Golden Day being a tough drill sergeant? Well, he had to be tough with a name like that, kind of like a boy named Sue. And he was had a drinking problem, but he could soldier, drunk or sober. He was a soldier, and he put us through the paces. And but when I found out his first name was Golden, I said, "Good God, Golden R. Day." I didn't ask him if the middle name was Radiance, or Radiant. That would be a bit much.
Okay, that is good. Okay, you got moved from the tanks to the 12th Armored. Now, how did you find out, and how did that come about, and at what point were you in Kentucky, or did you go to?
Well, we were each day after our basic training was completed. Each day they'd post a list of names assigned to different units around the world, around the country, wherever. And each day we were watching, and my buddies were going off to tank battalions, and I said, "Boy, I don't know where I would hide 30 tons of pig iron." And I said, "I'd rather be in the infantry." And lo and behold, I got an assignment to the Armored Infantry in Barkley, Texas. So that's just that's the way fate works, I guess. Or maybe the universe knew that I was an inept tank driver and should not be left in one of those flaming coffins.
Good idea. Tell me your journey from Kentucky to Camp Barkley and those experiences the first few days that you remember, and the company you were putting.
Well, I am still confused, because at some time I had an address of Fort Hood, Texas, or Camp Hood, Texas at that time, and I don't know the reason for it. Now they said, well, we had maneuvers at Camp Hood, but it's something was wrong with I know we once had some letters that I had written home that were addressed Fort Hood, but I don't remember what the return address was, what the company was, or anything. So, but well, at any rate, I wound up at Barkley, and they had these little plywood shacks, and you've heard of a lot of those, haven't you?
Tell me your first impression of those plywood shacks, and what did you call them? You didn't call them plywood shacks. What did you call those things?
Hutments. Hutments. I had even forgotten that. It's called a plywood shacks for so long. That's the way the mind works. So
tell me about all that, and finding your company, and which company you started out with, and your captain, and kind of those first impressions of Texas and Barkley. Well,
I remember Sergeant Gillis and Sergeant Suggs, who was the first sergeant, and I don't remember who the captain was. Yeah, I do too. It was Steve Gombos, and and I lobbied for a job as a company clerk, and I got it. And Bob Beeman had been transferred somewhere else, and I was going to take over there. And so I got the job as company clerk, and doing a satisfactory job, I guess. Wasn't any. I could type. That's the reason I got the job. And but we Captain Gombos and I never saw eye to eye. We were always at sword points, and any little thing that he didn't like, well, he'd come down on me. But we were in a separate unit. We were over with headquarters company in the what do you call it? I don't know. You've probably heard of John. It'll come. It'll come. But Idas Cleveland, Bob Beeman for a while. I sent a picture to, which was published in the Hellcat News, of John Macetic, who was the administrative sergeant major, I call him, and Idas Cleveland, and Harry Fryer, who just rejoined that a year or two ago, and then I don't know. We went out on maneuvers and typing on a little portable typewriter, typing up payroll. Had to do 5 copies or something like that. You know, you make a mistake, take it all out, erase, put them on. Really grim.
Did you keep records of supplies and stuff like that, or just the payroll?
No, this is payroll, and then we had to make up the payroll. We had to go get the men to sign the payroll. And of course, we had a few illiterates who had to have their signature witnessed, and so that they could be sure that it was them. And we taught one of them to write his name so that he could. But and that guy got engaged to a school teacher. That was Grady Graves, and I looked for him on a CD-ROM, a phone ROM, and I found about 15 Grady L. Graves in Texas, for crying out loud. I don't know. There must be something about Texas that sort of a grave situation. I may harken back to Shakespeare.
So you were with headquarters. So you weren't. With
I was in C Company, but I was assigned as a company clerk. Well, one day we had a little falling out, and so I lost my job as a company clerk, and I've forgotten the name right offhand of the guy that took over, and so I became a rifleman, and I think that's 101. MOS is 101, and then I had to start learning about about being a rifleman, and shortly thereafter we were shipped to the POE, and I don't mean Edgar Allan. And
what did the POE stand for?
Port of Embarkation.
Okay, tell me, in Berkeley, you were in C Company. Tell me about some of the guys in C Company.
Oh.
Your impressions. I mean,
How long have we got?
Okay, well, the one that would stand out the most in your mind.
Well, I mentioned Gillis. Now he was the intellectual in the group. He was like Plato in I can't even remember the name of the comic strip, Beetle Bailey, and he was a sometime poet, and he was the intellectual, and nice guy. Just enjoyed conversation, and I guess Donald Haig was probably the one who stood out most. But Haig was the quintessential soldier. He had given Captain Gombos his basic training, and and he was he was a great guy until he got drunk. And he and I've forgotten the name, Johnson. I don't remember exactly what the other guy's name was. The two of them came in one night, and they tried to open the door to the shack. He says, "Haig, the door's stuck." He said, "Well, push on it." He pushed on it again. The door's open outward. So they both got back and ran and went out of their feet and just ripped the door right out of the wall. And there was one young chap who was just a, he wasn't a sissy. He was just sort of didn't know quite which end was up. And one night Haig came in. He was pretty loaded, and he for some reason or other, this kid was on his mind, and he said, "Oh, you zip!" and he threw a bayonet, came right over that kid's head. Almost frightened him to death, I think. But and Haig realized what he had done and pulled that thing out, and he didn't hassle the kid much after that. But he was a good soldier, and he was commissioned right after Herlesheim, and then he was wounded a little bit later, and a ricocheted bullet caught him in the hand. But I wrote him after the war was over. I got one letter back. He said, you can't control these kids. They don't know anything, and they blah 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 blah." He was totally disappointed with. Of course, he had to go back to Master Sergeant. Many of the lieutenants were busted back to after the war because there were no jobs for officers anymore. So, and it turned out that there were a lot of master sergeants around that didn't have anything to do.
Tell me about the port of demarcation. What do you remember that as?
Embarkation.
Yeah. When did you? What was your feeling as you heading towards? You went to Camp Shanks. Did you go to Shanks?
Camp Shanks, New York. Yeah.
Okay. Tell me how you felt going there.
Oh, I was just one of the troops being moved, and going, as far as the going is concerned, we got on a train and rode for days and days and days, and they had these steel bed racks, and they stacked them up like as much as they did in the troop ships, and you slept on, I don't know, 2 or 3 or 4 tiers, and in the day you just sat around on the same bunks, waited for time to pass and the trains to go, and then we got to POE, and there were some British troops there, and the way they marched, we mocked them, and how we swing their arms up to the shoulder high, and their dress was funny, of course, but everybody's dress was funny in those days. And then we got to the PX and met some of the New York and New Jersey girls, and chatted and bought coffee and drank loads of coffee. And then went over to New York. went over to New York on the Weehawken Ferry, and there was a hurricane. Had no idea what a hurricane was, but we could hear glass falling out of the buildings that had been, and we're down at Times Square, and so the glass is falling. So what? But the wind was blowing. We just figured that was what New York was like. As far as I'm concerned, it is much like that. I've been back a couple of times since. But
when they put you on the ship to go to England, did you have all your personal effects with you, your duffel bag and stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Did they gave that all to you before you?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me what was in was everything in one duffel bag?
Yeah. Oh, it had a rifle and a duffel bag, one on each shoulder.
Tell me what they
and a
issued
music.
to you in that duffel bag. What possessions did you take with you?
Well, just our clothing and shaving gear, and very little else. And a rifle, of course,
Okay, did
and
you have
ammunition.
3 pairs of socks, 2 uniforms, or do you remember?
I don't remember. Those are details.
Okay, tell me about the trip over. What you did, how you filled your time.
I got sick. I was seasick. I got on the boat. It was at the pier, and it would slide up. It was just a little bit of movement. I got sick when I stepped on that darn boat. I was sick all the way. I think it took us 31 days to cross, and I was sick all 31. We had hammocks. Well, we had the picnic tables where we ate, and then we hung the hammocks up above the picnic tables to where we slept. And I think they had shipped horses or something. The odor of straw was pervasive, and then of course the odor of vomit joined that, and the odor of stale food and poor ventilation. Just sort of roughing it.
No one has ever told me, were those rooms or were there big galleys where y'all stayed? Nobody's ever explained where you had the bunks and everything. Was it huge?
Well, there were I would guess areas probably 4 times as big as this room, and we'd have these tables and we'd have hooks to hook the hammocks to, and I don't know. Don't think I guess the hammocks just hung against the wall during the day, and so I just passed my time lying down on the seat of the picnic tables, reading Earl Stanley Gardner, what was his name, Perry Mason Mysteries, and whatever other book I could find to read, and The Saint and that sort of stuff. Just trivial non-literature, I call it. And and I got when I got on my feet, we'd have to go up and walk around on the promenade deck each day, and I was just sick all the way. And there's no sickness like it. No sickness like it. And oddly enough, I've outgrown that. It got to the point where I could. I'd ride in an airplane, I'd get sick. And when I got on a DC, the first time I flew commercially, I got on a DC-3 and I got woozy, and because I mean it was still at the airport. I'm walking up this ramp and I'm sick already. So that's really a tough.
So were you sick on the way back from Europe?
I got sick. I got just violently ill. Matter of fact, I went to the mess hall. I was going to eat, and I ate, and I I was standing near the garbage cans, and I just leaned over a garbage can and left my food in the kitchen.
So you never did get over it during the war?
Never did get over it during the war. Matter of fact, I was probably 60 years old before I got over being airsick. And I'm not sure that I wouldn't be airsick. I've had one flight since then where the winds got up to like 50 miles an hour, flying to Cincinnati, and I was just sitting in my seat after everybody else had left. The captain came in and said, "Are you all right, sir?" And I said, "Well, when my stomach lands, I'll get up and go." So that's I was really very sensitive to it.
Tell me about England.
Well, all I remember about England is the little area called Tidworth, where we were shipped to the Tidworth barracks because they thought the AIB was A/B, which meant it was airborne, and so they shipped us to this airfield. They were thought we were going to airdrop us, and the half-tracks showed up. How are we going to drop those half-tracks? How are we going to even get them into the aircraft? So they discovered that the AIB was Armored Infantry Battalion and made other accommodations for us. But we were in these pyramidal tents, and we'd go over to I guess the name of the town, the village was Tidworth, but all I remember was this big manor house, and the local ladies volunteered, served us tea and biscuits, and nothing was very sweet. You know, I have a sweet tooth, and I had an awful time dealing with tea, which had maybe a quarter of a teaspoon of sugar in it, but then I put some milk in with it, and it made it fairly palatable, but not like the good old robust sweetened tea we had back home. And then we started this show. This guy named Goldstein from New York had, for some reason, we got together special services, we were called, and so we were told to go to this old theater and rehearse. So we rehearsed, and we got to put the show pretty well together, and then they moved us over to France, and we finally put the thing on, and I think it was in Ophé, and that was part of my acting career, my theatrical career.
I've never heard. Nobody's ever told me about this.
Well, as I said, Goldstein is a very clever and creative guy. And I understand that he's out in California somewhere, and he goes under the name of Gold or something like that, and is as a comedian. Man, and he was funny. He'd stand on the porch in the barracks, and he'd say, he just started spontaneously, and have you got my yo-yo? that sort of foolishness, and he was very clever. Well, he wrote most of the skits, I guess, and songs, and put the whole thing together. And we rehearsed it, and there was, I guess I might as well reenact part of this. I have a fairly good memory for songs, and so I can remember the words. People become startled when I hear a 1940s era tune, and I start singing the lyrics, because I just learned them when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, and so I just know them. And so he, I don't remember all of this, but one of the skits involved a guy who was dressed with a uniform with big, shiny, what do you call them, aluminum foil bars on each shoulder, and so he's got a pair of scissors, and he's cutting paper like the censor would, and so this Goldstein who happens to be the star of the show as well, said, well, he comes in with a broom, he's sweeping, and the guy says, "Straighten up, soldier," and he says, "I'm sorry, sir, I come from a stupid family." This is spontaneously. We're during a rehearsal. And we had everything was planned, and here he does that. Everybody breaks up, and so we. At any rate, he says, well, he starts to sing a little song. The censor, can I say this? Those home-cooked meals I sure do miss, and the coffee makes me uncomfortable at night. And the lieutenant says, don't mention it. And then he says, censor, can I state how the English plumbing is out of date? The chain you have to pull and the 10-minute wait, don't mention it. and it says all these rules and regulations, they're wearing out my patience. You cut out all the news that I am given. Everything I say, sir, goes underneath your razor. Mind if I tell him I'm living? And he says, censor, and he goes on for another little bit. Oh, thanks for putting me in touch, and for how you work, thanks very much. And the lieutenant says, don't mention it. And that was one little skit. And he had somebody sing a little song, a little love song that he had written called, and he goes, I wish that I could be with you to do the things we used to do. Remember, I still love you, dear, even though we're not so near. I dream about you every night, and once again I hold you tight. I wish that I could be with you and make my dreams come true. And and there was a little kid from New Jersey who yodeled, and I thought yodeling was Western stuff, but I had no idea how many people in New York and New Jersey love that country Western. If it ain't country, it ain't music. That's their attitude. And then Goldstein came out with what I think was really the peak of the show, and that's when he somebody said, "Why are you complaining about things being changed?" He said, "Well, the Army's going to change it." And so he starts, the Army's going to change it, the Army's going to change it, the Army's going to change it all around. They make a set routine for you explaining every fact, and you drill you by the numbers till you know just how to act. And when you think you've got it, the best one in the batch, the SOP collapses and you have to start from scratch. You meet a gal, you make a date, a gorgeous set of plans, and the sergeant caught you leaving camp, you're scrubbing garbage cans, and you open up your laundry, and wow, you're in a fix. You sent them 20 pieces, and they only laundered 6. My fate was then decided, no ands or ifs or buts. I'll get out of this Army, I'll make them think I'm nuts. I pulled my hair, I chewed my nails, I went around biting people. For 2 whole days and nights I roosted on our chapel steeple. The last I took to drinking became the local bargent. But do you think they discharged me? Nah, they made me sergeant. And the Army's going to change it. The Army's going to change it. And then the Army's going to change it all for you. And so that was, I think, the cutest little bit. And so, and then there was the one, and I was the star of this one, and I don't remember anything except that they moved the damn latrine, and I can't find it anymore. I'm going around like
So was this for everybody? That was just everybody that was around?
Well, no, we had this little troupe that, and I don't know how we managed to get back together after we had moved over to France, but we put the show on in France. And they had a regular little theater there. I think it was in Ophé. And so we put it on, and it was very, had rave reviews, both of them. 2 guys said, that was a great show.
So that That was a nice break, huh?
Yeah, really. And so anyhow, we were. That's on my transition from England to France was by a troop ship at Southampton, and I was sick again. I was sick, and I didn't throw up, but I was just miserable. And they put us on this big ship, and they moved us over. I don't know how many miles. What's the channel's like 21 miles across. They must have taken us about 20 miles out, and then they had a stairway down the side of the ship. Had a rifle, duffel bag. What do we hold on with, you know? I guess the thing to do, there was a guy in front of you and a guy behind you, and you didn't want to knock so somehow you hung on. And it was really a picnic wrestling that stuff around.
Did you
I'm crying.
go into a boat?
Then we went into an LST or LCT or whatever, and then that was even rougher, and I just spent all and you couldn't lay down. There was no place to lie down. It was, you just suffered through it. So we landed at La Havre, and then we got it was raining. We got into a truck, trucked over to Ophé, and there was a Chateau de Beaumolet, and the big chateau had a bomb crater right in the middle of it. It was just devastated, and but there were outbuildings all around, and we got for our billet a storage shed for apples, and so we got the apples and threw them over in the manure pit, and the lady of the house, whatever her designation might be, came over and said, "Don't throw my apples away." We had to scoop them back up, we had the carts, haul them over, and let them make cider from them. Now I don't know whether they washed them or not. I wasn't along on that trip, but the after telling that story around, the market for cider went plunging. We would swap cigarettes for cider, of course, and usual barter system prevailed. And but we had guys sleeping on the floor, and then they had a little loft where some of us slept. And it was there that I was promoted to sergeant. I became an assistant squad leader, and it was announced to me when I was up in the loft. That's all I remember about being in the loft, by the way. Except that's where I slept.
Did the captain of the units, who decided if you became a sergeant?
Well, the sergeant, the captain. I'm sorry, the platoon sergeant, the squad leader, and the platoon sergeant decided who they wanted to be assistant squad leaders and who they wanted to be squad leaders, and so on. And then they told the platoon leader, the lieutenant, and the lieutenant took that information to the captain and said, "This is what we want," and so the captain signed the orders. Oh, I forgot about that. When I was company clerk, a couple of guys wanted to go on a three-day pass, something like that. I learned to sign Steve Gombos' name better than Steve Gombos could. I don't know how many illicit passes I issued for that. I mean, nobody misses them, for crying out loud. You just give them a pass and let them go. I signed a little sheaf of passes. These guys would go on and they
Did they have
take
to
her
pay
through.
back? Did you get it paid? Did you get paid for it, or you just?
No, no, just gave them to us. Just I guess you might say I'm kind of getting back at Steve Gombos. Always a little bit of that antipathy between him and me, and so let's see, we built a lot of paths. The buildings, the bricks were loose, and we'd take the bricks and make footpaths, and so we had places pretty well spruced up before we left. And
How long were y'all there?
I don't know, probably 2 or 3 weeks.
Was that training period, or just kind of waiting?
There wasn't much training could be done. There were no real open fields to work on. But then we just sort of wandered around and worked, making walks and whatever. Somebody gave me a book in French. Says, "Can you read that?" I said, "Well, I'll read part of it." And so I have since taken considerable French, and I tell French stories and that sort of thing. Most of them dirty, so I don't think I've ever put that in here.
But tell me about your duties as a sergeant. What was expected of you that was different than when you were just a private?
Well, it was just a matter of having like half the squad from time to time. I mean, during the latter part of the war, we would capture 2 towns simultaneously with one squad. I would take one half the squad, and Bob Bassett would take the other half, and we would go move in and take over the gendarmerie. And one town there was went into the gendarmerie and the armory, whatever they call it, and they had pistols and rifles, all kinds of weapons, covering a huge desk, and just piled. He said, "Here they are." I said, "Yeah," and I'm me, and I can take 1 or 2 of those things, but I can't. I picked up a Luger and a little Mauser, but that was all the guns I managed to get away with, and then I took several. I handed them out to the guys in the squad, and they surrendered the town to us, and then we moved on. And so it's let's see if we can be a little more chronological here.
Tell me the day that you found out that you were headed towards combat.
That's where I was going. We were told to mount up and be ready, prepared to move out. It said we're going to clear out of here, so let's get going. And so we knew then that we were going to be into a combat situation pretty soon. So we moved out. We got over to the Maginot Line, which was just at where we were, and I was sort of amused at one of the Hellcat books that showed that we were attacking the Maginot Line. Well, it was just a bunch of hollow shells. They had there was no armament. There was no attempt to hold that, because they had already the Germans had already shown that the Maginot Line was nothing but a bunch of concrete shells, and so that all they did was just drive down the highway and go around it, and so we were assigned to go out, and we got out into that general area, and our orders were to make contact with the enemy. And so we started out on this wide field, and we were all spread out across the field, and we started getting some burp guns, and so we went down looking for something to shoot at. Couldn't see anything. So well, as far as we're concerned, we had made contact with the enemy, and we knew where the enemy was, so we fulfilled our mission. And so the column, instead of backing up, decided to swing around, and the head of the column swung around, and as we were following, they had gotten on the way. As we were following, mortar shells started falling, and one of them fell fairly close behind me because I still got some little steel in the back of my head, little slivers, and it killed. I think the guys' names were Camel and Larthy, and they Cameron, and they were fairly close behind me, and I caught those little bit. And I didn't realize it. In several days later, I thought I had a pimple or in the back of my head, and it was healing, so didn't do anything about it. And I didn't get a Purple Heart either. But I got off. At least I survived it, and so that was.
What was that? I saw Sergeant Ryan, Saving Private Ryan. He was
Yeah.
What was that like? If you don't mind telling about, what was that like? That first day of battle, and what was your thinking, and how did you do it? And tell me how does a person do that? Was it what you expected?
Well, I guess you could say it was pretty much expected. Well, let me go on with that. After these two guys were killed, and I didn't realize what had happened. I was just moving as fast as I could move, and there was a fence in front of me. I don't know how I got over it, under it, through it, or how, but I was on the other side of the fence, and I got away. And then they told me that these two guys had been killed behind me, and I was scared. As I said, I didn't know how I got through, under, or over that fence, but I was on the other side of it, and so that's and you just live in a constant state of well, it could happen to me, but I don't think it's going to, and you have to have the attitude that you're I guess you could say under divine protection, and so that's I had to live that way through the whole war, because it wasn't easy, and we got through with the Maginot Line. I was frightened during that, because these guys, there could have been people inside those pillboxes with rifles or machine guns and just knocking us off, and in retrospect, it would have been strategically silly for them to be in the pillboxes, because they were not good vantage points from the direction we were attacking from. It would have been indefensible from that direction. So, but we go in and lob our concussion grenades into there and let it go boom, and then we go in and see there's nobody there. We go over to another pillbox, throw another grenade, and let it go boom, and we go in and see, and it just became a kind of a game. And we figured, well, we got it all cleared out. We know there are no German troops in this area, so we can move on. And so that's I guess the way I guess that's the way war works. And so then then it was Colmar. We went down to Nancy, and I don't know. All I remember is the the restroom facilities.
Well, tell me about it.
Well, you had little steel pedestals that you put your feet on, and the water was running underneath you. That's where you did your business. And as far as I know, I understand that we cleared out the Colmar pocket, but I do not believe that I had any part in it. And I'm entitled to the patch, but I just don't think that I was engaged at that point. And I guess about the next thing that I remember is the one that when we were told to move out in the middle of the night, and pitch black, and I was, as assistant quad leader, I was handing out, opened up the well in the bottom of the half track and handed a light C ration and a heavy C ration to each of the troops, and I handed out, and gave everybody their rations, and we moved out, and this will connect in a bit. So we got up to near Herlesheim, and they gave us white aprons, their piece of white muslin with a hole in the center, so that we would have our shrouds in case we were killed. Well, there was snow on the ground, so we were supposed to be camouflaging ourselves, and I didn't look very successful to me, because I could see every one of these birds with these things flapping on the sides, and so, but then that's all right. We we make a lot of mistakes in wars, and hopefully we learn from them. And I remember lying there waiting for somebody to do something, and I went to sleep. I'm lying on the ground, cold, the ground is frozen. I went to sleep. And so then we got moving, and then we caught some intense fire. We started going across these bridges, and we'd see men whose bodies had been extruded between through the tracks. The were driving tanks and trucks across the creek and on these bridge grids, pushed the meat right through, and it was a really grisly mess. And we got over across about 2 of those streams and got to pretty heavy fire, and yeah, and I don't think the guys in the 56th Armored Infantry Battalion are going to like this, but they were on our left flank and they were firing at us. And Bob Bassett had his field jacket on. A bullet sliced it open so that you could see his sergeant stripes. A bullet went right through the center of an entrenching tool handle on another guy who was hanging from his belt. I found out later, sitting in a cell hole, and after my canteen had thawed out a little bit, it was leaking because there was a bullet hole in the bottom of it, right across, left a crease on the bottom of it. And none of it was hurt. But anyhow, the firing got pretty heavily, and Bob Bassett and I got into this shell hole, which was on the bank of the creek. And this kid named Katz was behind us, and apparently he got too curious about what was going on, and he got a bullet right between the eyes. And I talked with a guy yesterday, I can't remember his name, who was with him, and I hadn't made that connection earlier. But Sheldon was apparently there along with those guys, and he was a big Tennessean. I think he's from Tennessee, and he came up to join us in our shell hole, and in the course of that, he got a bullet dead center through one wrist, and one flesh wound in one leg, and I've forgotten what he was hit 3 times in that, just coming up over that parapet, and I had my rifle lying up on the edge of that hole, and a bullet just shattered the butt of that rifle, just splinters all over the place, and there went my rifle. And so we were trying to put bandages on Sheldon, and then we saw that they had laid down a smoke barrage, and so we were supposed to get out. And so we started to withdraw. And of course, I'm not a big man. Bassett's a pretty good-sized fella. But we would take, every time Sheldon would take a step, and then his whole weight would come back down on our shoulders. And it was kind of a grim passage. And then we moved over to a little footbridge, and there was a tree limb which had fallen down almost parallel to that footbridge, and I was standing on that limb and pulling on Sheldon, and Reese was up over pulling on his field jacket, and Bassett was behind him trying to lift, and you know, the footbridge was not very wide, and so we somehow got him over there and got him onto the hood of a Jeep, and so he went back to the waterworks to where the aid station was. And then later I was just, you know, I was at I didn't have anything to do, so I was decided, well, I'll go back. I don't know why I did that. It's just, it come to me. I was back at I thought that I had taken Sheldon all the way back to the waterworks. Yeah, I did. And I went inside. Then I went back out into the field, which was a stupid thing to do. and I found Joe Kemp, who was in our outfit, and he was pretty badly beat up, and so I picked him up and put him on the back of a tank, and I put some other guys on the back of the tank, and then the tank back through across this tank bridge, and because if there's not much armor on the back of a tank, so you have to keep the front of the tank toward the enemy. So he had to back across this bridge. Thank heaven he made it, because I rode back too, and but I got a nice letter from Joe Kemp's wife thanking me. He had almost lost the total use of his left arm, but the rest of him was fairly intact, and so I was gratified by that. But other than Joe, I gave Joe some morphine. That's one thing the assistant squad leader did, by the way. I had morphine little capsules that we could inject or give to them to kill the pain.
Did you have special training, or they just said, here they are?
No, here they are. Figure out how to use it. Can we cut?
Oh yeah.
I'd like to use.
Going back the tank.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we were at Herlesheim, and I had as far as I knew, the waterworks was Herlesheim for me, and later on we spent our nights on a pile of cow beets in the cellar of one of the houses in, I guess it's Herlesheim, but I'm not sure. And we would, every morning we would go out and attack. So they give the order to attack, and we'd get it lined up and start across the bridges, and then we'd see we'd see the German troops with their tanks getting ready to attack us, and then we would somebody would call for an airstrike, and we'd see these little planes coming over and dropping a bomb or strafing, and so then the Germans would turn, go back, hide out again, and we'd go back to our cow beets. And
I hate to say this. You're saying cow beets?
Beets, B-E-E-T-S.
Oh, beets.
I don't know whether they were cow beets or sugar beets or.
They were beets.
They were big, they're too big to be turnips. Okay, they looked a lot like turnips, but they were not turnips.
So were you aware of how
No, I hear of people who were imprisoned at Herlisheim. I had no contact, but we kept attacking the bridges, the successive little channels. I don't know what kind of a drainage system they had to have, but it's pretty phenomenal to have to go over that many bridges. And so we kept this up for several days, and when I went back with Sheldon to an aid station, and there were a pile of rifles lying. The riflemen had come in with. They wouldn't give up their weapons even after they were wounded. So they just there was a pile probably as large as from here over to the corner of that bed, and about 3.5, 4 feet high.
So about 10 feet long. And
yeah, about it was sort of like a circle, just a pyramid of rifles, just tossed in a pile. And so I picked one up and made that my rifle. Found out somebody was a horrible soldier. He hadn't done justice to that rifle at all. The rifling was pitted, and so I figured, well, what the heck. So I picked up another one, which looked like in pretty good shape. I took it back. I took the one with the pitted barrel, and I used it in combat. And I had this other one I kept nice and clean, well oiled. I rolled it up, and somebody had a baby blanket from somewhere, and I wrapped that up in a baby blanket, shoved it down into a flag case, and put it into the half track. So I always had a clean rifle for inspection. And and it worked. I mean, but the old rifle, I even got it, muzzle of it in the mud, and I just shot to knock the knock the plug out. And but that old rifle served me pretty well, and carried it all the way through the war, and I always had a clean rifle. When we go back to reserve, I'd pull out that thing out of the flag case, run a patch through the barrel, wipe it off. Man, I was ready for inspection. And I had Lieutenant, hey, that's a pretty good-looking rifle, soldier. Thank you, sir. I babied that rifle. You're bringing up things that I had long forgotten.
Okay, well, tell me where you went after Herlisheim, if I can get over the rifle.
Well, where was I?
Where did y'all go from there? What was the?
I don't. I think from there we the next move that I remember, we moved up to the bluff, a bluff above a little village, and they said, okay, we'll plan to stay here for 2 or 3 days. So we we started digging foxholes. Well, it started to rain. Well, you can't dig a foxhole in the rain. That wouldn't work. So we crawled under the half track to protect ourselves from the rain. We didn't want to get wet, and we were soldiers, but we weren't silly, and so we. I don't remember exactly how, but we had lost a Jeep sometime in the past, and then we recovered it. And when we recovered it, there were several cases of booze on it, and we suspect that it was the officers' booze that somebody had purloined and were taking back to the German officers, and we captured that Jeep, and I think, as I remember, the officers got the good stuff, and they left us with some Cointreau, which is a sweet, orangish tasting liqueur, and so somebody broke out a bottle of that Cointreau, and was passing it around. You barely get a sip out of it. You know, you have to turn your head on the side to get a drink out of that bottle, and I got a little bit lightheaded, you know. I thought, well, I better knock this stuff off. And then we got a call for squad leaders to assemble, and so Bob Bassett took off and went over and met with the other squad leaders, and they said, okay, well, we're gonna take this town, and you know, we were right inside of the town. We could see it. They could see us, and so they said, we're going to take the town. So, okay, so then the fun began, because we had Connolly. Connolly was a little tight. Burns was out of it. He was drunk. And somebody said later, he said, well, we saw Burns giving a demonstration of creeping and crawling over there. He was staggering around something fierce. So we put him back in the half track. And Means and Mears were both drunk. One of them got sick and threw up over the side of the half track. Let's see. Reese was still alive. Bob Crawford, who was a half-track driver, was entangled he had his legs entangled in the gear, all the gear shift levers down there, so we had to extricate him from that. And so Bassett drove the half-track. I didn't know how to drive. And I was the car commander, and Reese was on the rear machine gun. And so we started. We were going into an attack, you know. So we went over and we started firing tracers into that town, and kicked a few doors in, and it was all over. So we moved back up to the top of the hill again, and it was about, the sun was going down, and Burns wakes up and says, wow, what a nice sunset. Or sunrise, I should say. He said, what a nice sunrise. It was evening. And but during the course of going into that town, I happened to look back, and Reese nodded, and I looked down, and here's Connolly trying to pry the lid off of that case of Cointreau. He could get some more booze. And I said, Patty, and he looked up and said, well, he said, you're caught in the act, you might as well quit. Slammed the lid back down. So we get, and then the next thing that I recall is going down to Worms, I think the correct pronunciation, and there was a near Worms. They had that tread, what do you call it? A suspension bridge, not a suspension bridge, pontoon bridge, and we drove across on that, and you know, just usual stuff. And then we got all of a sudden we were on the Autobahn. And we were driving down the Autobahn, and we stopped at a bridge, and they said, "Okay, get out and protect the bridge, and keep anybody away from it, so it won't be blown up." So we carefully fired a few shots at random to scare away anybody who might be around, and we when the rest of the combat command or whatever it was got across, we got it back in well, a half track came back and picked us up. We moved back up to the front of the column. Then we spearheaded our squad spearheaded that blast down the Autobahn, and we were in the front of it, and we had a sort of a penchant. There were six or seven of us that got up. We'd lose a bunch of people. We'd come back. The same seven kept coming back. It was uncanny. There was Bassett and me, and Reese, whom we kind of babied, because he was like 32 years old at that time, and he had a family and a farm, and he was drafted by well, politics probably. And let's see, Connolly. I don't remember all of the names right offhand, but we seemed to live a charmed life. John Shibley. John Shibley was the first scout. I was second scout, and every time we'd go into a town, we went in that sequence. And so one day, they put another platoon in front of us. So third platoon will take over today. And that morning, some young German had been planted beside the road with one of their versions of the bazooka, and he hit this half-track side on and just caused an inferno. And one of the guys were running around burning, and it was here we were back behind them. And then another time we got into